Okay.
I don't
You're
even
being
know.
recorded.
I don't even know what this project is about.
It's not really about anything except just to
Therefore-
discuss whatever it is you may want to discuss. You don't have to stay here. It's okay with
Okay,
me.
because he puts me sometimes on the spot. Because I don't. If you had told me, Anetta, I want you to talk, then maybe I can. Depends what subject. Depends what. But I have nothing to say except it's Christmas Eve. You know, it's Christmas Day. Not my favorite day of the year. For some reason.
I find it calming in a sense.
You find
I find it calm. It's always a day that I can spend the whole day doing whatever I want because no one will bother me.
That's a point. Yes. Don't you feel out of the loop completely?
But it's a loop I just don't care about.
No, I don't care either. But I find Christmas Day to me is the equivalent of being in a foreign land on Sunday, or which I've done it once. We were in Portugal once over Christmas. We arrived on Christmas, and it was eerie because they celebrated Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then tomorrow is a Boxing Day. In some countries, tomorrow is a holiday as well. And the whole country was closed. And I was sitting there.
Why don't you tell me, if you care to?
Yeah.
How are you doing these days?
Me, how am I
You're
doing?
enjoying yourself?
Not particularly. I am actually, I'm healthy, and I'm grateful for that. Touch wood. And my children seem to be in relatively good shape. And I'm not unhappy. But I'm not euphoric either. I'm finding that that my friends and my circle are aging. And I must be aging too then.
That's not necessarily a reason for
It's extremely
consternation.
depressing.
Is that depressing?
Depressing, because they're getting frailer, they get immortalities. Maybe I have older friends. I have 90% of my friends are 10 years older than me. You can stay here, Andrew.
No, go ahead.
You can stay right here.
Um,
I can't be candid with John or with anybody in public. The only place in this world that I can be candid is in a psychiatrist's office.
Yeah?
Yes, that's the only place that I can actually relax and tell them what's on my mind, but otherwise I can't. I really can't, John.
Do you, as I told you before,
Yeah.
I'm recording this. If you don't want to say anything, you can just get up and leave.
You're right.
If you want to, though,
Yeah.
I'll keep on asking you some questions. Do you enjoy the day? Do you enjoy your daily life?
Oh yes, I enjoy what because of the changes in my life. I'm very solitary, very, very solitary. There's a really shift in my life, and whereas somebody might feel very depressed about it, and I know that many people would feel depressed about it or uncomfortable. I love it. The fact that I can do what I want, and I have a little job. I don't know if you know. I do work for the DSS, and I'm good at it.
What do you do for them?
The foster care program at DSS requires that each foster care child, each case has to be reviewed every 6 months. The status, what's happening to the child and where are they going and all that. And there is a panel that meets every 6 months to evaluate the issue. And they need, it's part of the system by law, they need to have a person from the community, a volunteer that doesn't know about it, that has nothing invested. And I was trained for that. I took 3 or 4 days at the DSS in Boston.
When was that?
I did that about 18 months ago.
I didn't know
No,
that.
yeah, I got trained in Boston. It was they tell you how to behave, how
Yep,
to do it.
yep.
And I did that. I went by tea, as we all know. I love it. I went by tea to South Station. Then I walked to near the Federal Court, and I was trained for that. And then I do this. They call me. I'll show you. I get a form once a month. I get assigned my cases. And it's on a volunteer basis, but you get lawyers, doctors, old people, young people, people that want to, black people, white people, people that want to give it to the community. And this is a very interesting thing, because I don't feel that I am doing nothing. I have to be in the panel and I have a vote, and I have I don't know the case beforehand, or except in one case. I sometimes see, very rarely I see every 6 months I see the same case, but it's rare. It's usually hit and run.
Tell me more about what you like about your life.
So I like this.
And what you don't like, if anything. And you don't have to share anything you don't like.
No, what I like is I like the fact that I'm not accountable. Because I've always been very busy, John. I know that for some reason when you were little, when you were young and I came into your life, I thought I was a real sybarite and a bum and I did nothing. But I've always did something, I've always done something with my life. I've worked for preterm for years. I was a volunteer in an abortion clinic nearly every day. I worked when the abortion became legal. I just don't talk about what I do.
Listen,
And
just
then,
to be clear,
no.
none of this is about me. I don't
No,
care.
but I'm just saying, I've always done stuff. And then I was interpreting and this and that, but I got sick of all that. And this DSS gives, if I wasn't such a lazy bum, I should do it more often even. But I find it can get you can get very involved, which you mustn't. So anyway, what do I enjoy about my life? I like this little job. I like my grandchildren. I like some of my friends, except it's painful. They're getting older and frailer, and it's.
There must be a huge difference between marriage to Dennis and marriage to
I can't go there. Marriage to Dennis and him is two different worlds. First of all, I was young. First of all, when I married Dennis, I met him at 13. You don't know the story. You should read the story because I wrote it all. It's all on tape, and I'm not going to tell you all this because you can read it. I met him when I was 13 years old.
I want to tell you this. If you want to put the 5-minute version on tape now, I can give a copy of this to your kids and your grandkids
If they want it, but I can.
It's probably not on video.
Not on video.
Here it is.
It's on tape. It's on tape, and I transcribed it. I met him when I was 13 years old. They all know that, by the way. I met them when he was 22. He's much older than me. And I went to Israel in 1952. I was 13, I think. 1952? Something like that. 1952, Israel just became a state in 48, and my father was a Zionist. And he was very active. He used to work for the Haganah. The Haganah was, you know what the Haganah was? They bought special illegal armaments. He used to buy armaments and send them to Palestine. Anyway, my father, when Israel became a state, his dream was to go to Israel. Because he was actually on his honeymoon. He and my mother went from Poland to Palestine. And then they took me in summer vacation. So they took me from Brazil. This little girl went by ship to Europe, and from Europe they took a boat that was the first boat that, it wasn't even a boat, it looked like a barge, that went from Marseille to Haifa. Because my father had a dream to be on a boat that had the Israeli flag. So we got to this boat, which was fascinating because it wasn't a cruise ship, it was the immigrants. It was the first 500 Olim, which is, Olim means in Hebrew, the Arab immigrants. So it was the first 500 immigrants that came from Africa to the Moroccan Jews to Israel. And this is in our boat. They were so primitive.
At the same time?
At the same time. We worked at the same time in this boat. I went from Marseille to Haifa, and they picked up those immigrants in Marseille to bring to Palestine, to Israel. And in this boat, I met Dennis. There was Dennis. He was 22 years old. He was also a Zionist because when he was young, he worked for something. He was like Hakshara, Habonim, which is also a left-wing, used to be a left-wing group of the Zionist movement. So he saved his bar mitzvah money. He was 22. He was at second-year medical school, and he went from South Africa also to Israel, which was a big schlep to go from South Africa. I don't know how I think he flew to France, and from France he took the boat to Haifa. And we met. So this guy, I'm 13, he's 22, he's gorgeous.
Fell in love with him?
Fell in love, madly in love with him. He didn't know who I was,
yeah.
But he didn't pay no attention to me. as he knew nothing, but we stayed together on this boat, and I thought he was the cat's meow because he organized a strike, because of course that because he felt they weren't treating the Moroccan Jews the same way as they were treating us. Why? Because they were steerage and we were up, which is upstairs, and it was rough like hell, this boat, and they were very primitive. They were tattooed. The women were smoking pipes. When there was a drill to see if there was a drill for the boat, if the boat was going to sink, they all thought we were drowning, so they were throwing themselves overboard. I mean, it was a zoo. Anyway, the staff used to slice the bread for the first class, which was steerage as well, and break the bread for the Moroccans. And Andrew Dennis took umbrage. He felt it was discriminatory and all that. He was always crazy. So he caused a incident. Anyway, he played the piano, and I fell in love with the music. And never mind. To make a long story short, he gave me I got his address. And we landed in Israel, etc., and that was goodbye. But we met twice by accident, once in the street and once when we flew out. This time we didn't go by ship, we flew out. He flew to London and I flew to Rome, and we met again in the airport by mistake.
And so then you wrote letters to each other?
I came to Brazil and I began writing letters, and the letter was, my name is Anetta, I'm the girl from Arza. I could speak English already a little bit. I could speak English because I learned at home. And I began writing him letters, and he responded. He did not know who I was, and we became...
Didn't remember?
Not really, very vaguely. He didn't know how old I was. And he wrote to me, and I wrote back. For 2 years, we wrote to each other. It's 4 years, but 2 years we wrote to each other. And then he wrote to me. He kept saying how old I was, and I would omit. Among my letters, I kind of never heard that one.
Yeah.
So here he was 4th year medical student by that time. He got in a boat and came from Cape Town to São Paulo, to Rio, to meet me.
Really?
Yes, he came. He came from Cape Town, from Johannesburg. He came on his vacation. He took a boat, and he came to meet me. And by that time I was 15. And then he asked me how old I was, and I had to tell him. So I was 15 years old, and he's 24. And we are in Brazil, and I'm living in a Catholic country. I'm a Jewish princess in a Catholic country. Doesn't look right, a guy, a gorgeous 6-foot-tall guy hanging around with a girl. So my father had to do a lot of things. He put him in a hotel, but he hung around.
But your dad knew that he was here because he was interested in you.
My parents met him. My parents met him in the boat and in Israel and all that. And my mother and my father loved him.
Who wouldn't love him?
They thought he was a cat's meow. He was charming. He was handsome.
But obviously there's 9-year difference, and now you're only 15 years old.
I'm 15 years old. I'm 15 years old, but this is another word. It's 50 years ago.
Okay, that is true.
15 years ago, 50 years ago, now he'll be his child abuse.
Okay,
so
then what?
Then what? So we spent 6 weeks together, hanging around my house, visiting, touring Brazil. So my parents, he stays in a hotel pro forma. So,
right.
so all my friends and my parents' friends say, where is this guy staying? In a hotel. My father pays for the hotel. He just wants to keep it kosher. And then I was like a Lolita. So he wants to marry me. I'm 15 years old. My father said, yeah, very nice. You go to school, you go back to South Africa, and we are coming to visit the family. So I go back to school. Now I'm 16 years old. And we go back to Cape Town. My parents take a trip from Brazil. If you look on the map,
huge.
South Africa is very close. It's 8 days by cruise ship, and it's very popular. Like people here go to the Caribbean, these two countries go back and forth to Rio, to Cape Town. They do. Rich people go to.
Okay.
But it's a wonderful trips. It's called Royal Interocean Lines. They run by the Dutch.
All right, so it's a luxury. It was a luxury.
No, it's not really. It's got no entertainment. It's just wood paneled, old world with Asian stuff.
Fantastic.
Fantastic food, no entertainment, no nothing.
Oh, I want you to hang on there.
All right, so you're on this cruise ship.
I'm on this cruise ship back and forth, so we went to Cape Town, and my parents met his family. Because my father wasn't going to let me marry and leave Brazil 50 years ago and go to Africa, so, which was crazy anyway. But I met the family, and my parents loved them, and they got along very well. My father didn't love them immediately because we were much more sophisticated. They were Lithuanian Jews. 99% of the South African Jews are from Lithuania, the Litvaks. And there was a little bit, but they were nice and generous, and my parents got along with them, and I liked the family, etc. And I was going to marry Dennis no matter what. There was nothing to talk about. So then we just got engaged. I got engaged to Dennis. I was 16, and I went back home. Every time we met for 6 weeks. So I only knew him. I met him on the boat, went to Israel when I was 13. Then when I was 15, he came to Brazil for 6 weeks.
Sure.
And then I went back to South Africa for another 6 weeks. And then we decided to get married. He finished medical school. By this time, he's 25. And I went back to school to finish high school.
All right, so then you finished high school.
I finished high school.
In Brazil.
In Brazil. I not only finished high school, but we have a system. I had 1 year like pre-college, because I had the old system. So I finished high school when I was about 16. And then I had 1 year which is called classical, which you decide either you go to the sciences or you go to the lit.
Yeah.
And I chose the lit, the languages and all that. So
Did you then go to college?
In South Africa.
All right, so then you went to South Africa.
I went 1 year of college in Brazil. And then I went to South Africa. And so we got kicked. The whole family, Walter and the whole family came too. Walter was Dennis's little brother, 21 years younger than he was. He was closer to my age than to... Anyway, let me get my glasses.
Sure.
Oh, my glasses. So they came to Brazil. Dennis, his mother, his father, and his little brother.
All right, so the wedding was in Brazil.
In Brazil.
Okay. Let's hold up right there for 1 second. Tell me, where were you born?
I was born in São Paulo.
And obviously your parents were Jewish.
Yes.
Where were they born?
My father was born in Kharkov in Russia, and my mother was born in Warsaw. And
Where did they meet?
They met in Warsaw. My father, during the Bolshevik Revolution, my grandmother, my Russian grandmother, got him out. She got him out from Kharkov, which is the Ukraine, because he had a sister living in Poland. That was two sisters. One was a dentist that lived in Poland, and another one that married a Pole, a Jewish, and they were all killed. And his father, my father's father, was a wealthy bourgeois, and when he had this factory of something, textiles, had a factory of textiles. When the Bolshevik came over, they liked him. The workers liked my grandfather, and they let him work in his own factory. And then he died of natural death, thank God. His name was Gregory. I named Gregory. I named Gregory after my grandfather. And my grandmother, my Russian grandmother, stayed in Russia. Her children are all gone in Poland. But my father's brother, Yasha, became a pilot. And he was a pilot, and I've got a picture of him in Russian uniform. He was a pilot, and my cousin, he had a daughter. He was married to a non-Jew. They were already very assimilated, but both sides of my families were very assimilated, and which Dennis's family wasn't. They were kosher and all that kind of business, and we weren't. Anyway, the Russian side of because they're both very interesting. The Russian side, my grandmother felt that they were going to put my father in the army. He was 17, 18, so she shipped him off to. He was in jail, I think, and then he was in jail, and then she shipped him off to be with his sisters, and he became a businessman. He was very attractive, very smart, then he met my mother, and they got married. My mother came from a very sophisticated home. Yasha Heifetz is my grandmother's cousin. My grandmother's name was Heifetz, and my grandmother was a beautiful woman and very talented. Everybody in that family was talented. They were all artists. But a Jewish woman, in those days, she became a fashion. She sold hats and all that, and her salon was famous, was absolutely famous, John. And she got married to a man from Vilna, my grandfather Elias, and he was 20 years older than she was. And they got married, and they had 2 girls, my mother and from my auntie Flora. And then they got divorced. So my grandmother was divorced from my grandfather. And the deal was that he didn't kind of give a divorce, they split. And he lived in Berlin, and then he lived in Paris. And the deal was that the girls have to go to school. So in Berlin. So while he wanted to so they went to boarding school in Berlin, my mother and her aunt and her sister. And she became, that's why I understand your father, you know. I mean, my mother was born in Poland, but man, she went to boarding school in Berlin. She's German. She's a Yeka, you know, there's nothing to talk about. And so nothing that your father does or the family does it's very familiar to me, because it's familiar.
All right, so your parents moved to Brazil.
Oh, so my father was a displaced person. My father never had papers because he was my grandmother. When he lived in Warsaw, he was a displaced. But it was called his passport was Nansen. It's called Nansen. Some Swedish count or some Swedish diplomat issued papers for displaced people. And my father had this particular document, and that was his only document he had. When my mother smelled a rat in 37, 36, because she smelled that Hitler was coming. And my father, I think, lost his business or something. And her sister, Flora, was in Brazil because she lived in Paris all her life. Because then the girls went from Berlin, they went to Paris, to Versailles, to board. They finished in school in Paris. And my aunt Flora was married, and she got divorced, and she had a broken heart and all that. And she and a friend of hers called Babette went to Rio de Janeiro in 1930 something. Those 2 women went from Paris to Brazil to open a boutique in Rio de Janeiro. They were wild. She opened a boutique, and it was the talk of the town. It was a fantastic shop, and all the rich people and all the generals, because it was a military dictatorship, were her customers. And the dictator of Brazil, Getúlio Vargas, his wife was my aunt's customer, and she asked this woman to sign papers for my parents to come to Brazil, and that's how my parents came to Brazil. Because my father, nobody wanted him, nobody in America, in Argentina, no one, he had no papers. And these people they signed this petition, and he came to Brazil, and that's how I was born. I was born 3rd of September 38, and invasion of Poland was 3rd of September 39.
Tell me about Dennis's parents.
Dennis. And then, so here I am.
How did they get to South Africa?
His mother was born in South Africa. His grandmother, his grandmother, I think, came from Lithuania. His father came from Lithuania, but his mother was already South African, very English.
Why did the Lithuanian Jews go to South Africa?
I think, you know how it is when one goes? It's the typical immigration business. First of all, I think, like the white Jews, many Jews came to New York, and many came, and then the Germans went to Cincinnati.
After the wedding, your wedding.
Okay, so we get married in Brazil, and we go to. Dennis graduated from medical school. He's a doctor now, and he's got a job even, and he was very bright, and he got a job with a professor of medicine and all that. But he said, I want to go to, but the deal with my parents was, my father said Dennis could marry me. I was a minor. I was 17 when I married him. My father signed for me. I was a minor, and my father said, there's a deal. You can marry my daughter, but you can't live in South Africa. You promise me that you come back. You can live anywhere in the world, but you cannot live in South Africa.
Why?
Because he already smelt a rat with the blacks. Apartheid wasn't yet there, but
What do you mean by that?
There was tensions in South Africa. South Africa was the most. When I lived in I lived there for 4 years, and it was during apartheid.
Your father told Dennis that he could marry you, but that you could not permanently live in South Africa.
Yes.
All right. So Dennis said fine, married you, and then did you go to South Africa?
I went to South Africa
for 4 years.
For 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. for 2 years. I went to I came to America first. I came to America, and when I came to Boston because he wanted to see a job at Children's Hospital, and we went to Colorado. We went all over America because he had offers of jobs.
All right, 2 years in South Africa.
Then 2 years in South Africa, then back to Brazil because I promised my father I was going back to Brazil, but it didn't work out. Dennis couldn't stand.
No job.
He couldn't stand working. They wanted him to revalidate his diploma in Portuguese. He was a doctor already.
All right.
So he said, I can't stay in this bloody country, so I'm going back to South Africa, and Gregory was born there. And we stayed another 2 years. So I stayed 4 years in South Africa, and he got a job in Boston, and that's how I came to Boston.
What kind of doctor was he?
At that time, he was a pediatric endocrinologist, and he got a job at Children's Hospital.
That's why you came to Boston.
That's why we came to Boston, because he got a job at Children's.
Now, your parents were okay with that?
Yes.
Now, they didn't feel badly that their daughter was 10,000 miles away?
Yes, but as we say in Hebrew, there was no brainer, because I said I got married to him. I was an only child. It's the craziest thing in the world. I was an only child. My parents loved me very much, obviously. I was a Jewish princess. And I went to I left Brazil and my home, and I went at the age of 17 to South Africa with a stranger that I knew, with a relative stranger. And my mother was 100% cool about that, which I've discussed. I wonder why she was so cool about that. And my father, when I got to Cape Town, I remember he in the hotel, he said, Anetta, for God's sake, I remember he had a pajama top, and he took his pajamas and he pulled it like that, and he said, Anetta, we're here, wait, let's go back and let's see what happens, and then maybe he'll come straight to Brazil and you won't come here. And I said, you skip this whole South African business, because he had to come back to be an intern. Well, we had to come back for 2 years, because he was an intern and a resident and all that. He couldn't straight from medical school get a job at Children's. So, but in analysis, which I was analyzed, and when I turned 40, I did 3 years of a psychoanalysis, the real McCoy, 3 times a week. 3 times a week I went to see, I was psychoanalyzed, and I didn't see a psychiatrist twice a week. I underwent Freudian psychoanalysis, but nobody does it now anymore. Practically nobody.
What was that?
That gave me a lot of insights, and why my mother let me go to South Africa. It's fascinating, and
maybe because you said that you wanted to, and she wanted to honor your wishes.
He was my ticket. Dennis was my ticket out of Brazil. I wanted to get out of Brazil, always.
You did, or your parents wanted to?
I wanted to get out of Brazil. I felt that because when I was 13 and 14 and all that, I told my father. Once I called my father and I said, you know what? Because I could always speak millions of languages. I said, send me to a boarding school send me to a boarding school in Switzerland. I wanted to go to Europe. I wanted to go to America. I said, send me somewhere else. Send me somewhere else. And I think Dennis was my ticket out of my home and out with marriage. Don't forget, I wasn't a hippie. I didn't take drugs. I didn't get pregnant. I didn't let my hair grow like the hippie movement. Yeah. What I did is I ran away from home, but I did it nicely. I married a nice Jewish doctor.
Do you feel in your life that you missed did you miss a turbulent adolescent 20-year-old adventure period?
No, because with Dennis,
had all that.
With more adventure than at 13, meeting a guy, writing letters. At 15, some guy comes to my house, moving to South Africa. I think I had enough adventure.
That's a lot of adventure.
I had to be during South African, the beginning of apartheid, so politically it was total turmoil and chaos, and it was apartheid, the beginning of apartheid.
Do you feel like in your life you missed the closeness with your parents through your middle years?
No, because I had a very close relationship with my mother. My mother saw me every 6 months. She came to this country every 6 months. To Boston.
She took a boat?
She took a plane. My mother went to South Africa every 6 months too. She went, and my father came to South Africa. My parents flew. My mother flew to see me when Gregory was born through the Ghana I don't even know what Ghana's called now. Through Ghana, my parents went through the Congo to visit me. They were fantastic people too. They were amazing, and when I came to America, every 6 months I saw my parents. They came here, and they came here for 3 to 4 weeks. And that's when Dennis one day said to when my father was dead,
Enough.
you can't, because our whole lives were on turmoil.
Okay, so you had 3 children, obviously.
No, 2, and then I had Mark here in America. The 2 others were born in South Africa, Gregory and Mark.
All right.
Alan.
And did you grow up in this? Did they grow up in this house?
Yes, Mark was born here.
So when did you and Dennis buy this house?
I came to America, let's see, Alan, when did Kennedy die? 63. Mark was born in 64. And I moved into this house in 62.
62.
I moved into this house in 1962. I've been in this house longer than I've been anywhere in the world. I've been in Brazil, I was 17 years old.
I love this house.
This is my home. This is my house. Sometimes I wish I didn't feel so close to my house. I have a relationship with my house that sounds crazy. I have a friend in Brazil, Adolfo Lerner. He's an art collector, very, very, very fine art collector. He's famous. And he has a fantastic house. And I used to say, and every time I go to Brazil, I say, I love this house, this apartment kills me, I love it. He said, a house is like a woman. You have to court it. You have to court. When you date a person, you've got to court. And I know what he means. This house takes a lot of courting. You have to buy flowers and you have to keep it. And sometimes with your father, I fight for this. I feel I am this house advocate. I feel that if I allow it, he's going to screw it up. Not because he doesn't have taste, because he does have taste, but because basically what I designed and what I want is I am much more sparse, as you can, I don't like so much. I don't like stuff.
I'll tell you, I've told you this many times in the past, but I will tell you again. First of all, I love this house.
I know you do.
And I love your decorations.
But John, it's a house, and if it's just a house.
That's true.
It's just a house, and my grandmother in Poland had an apartment that the Germans took confiscated. It was divine, because how do I know? Because most of the stuff that is gorgeous in my house is that she took it and I inherited. And you know what? She came to Brazil, and her sister took care of the apartment that worked with her, and she kept saying, come, and the sister said, I've got to take care of the apartment. And the Nazis came and killed her and took the apartment and all the stuff in it. It's just stuff. And if I didn't have this house, I wasn't so attached, maybe my life would be better. Maybe we could move to an apartment. Maybe I could sell the house and buy an apartment and not have to worry continuously about maintenance. This is ridiculous, the maintenance.
You don't think that this house ties you down, do you?
No, but it's maintenance. Every 5 minutes, this is an old house. This is an old house. For a modern house, this is an old house. The light in the front of the house broke yesterday.
Yes, but so what? This happens with all houses.
I know, and the pipes and the this.
All right,
and the
let me ask you this. Obviously, Dennis died. When did he die?
He died in 1982. He died 20.
And then you married my dad in
5 years
87.
later. Yeah, I met him. I met him 5 years after Dennis died.
What was your life like in those 5 years?
Insane. Very interesting. He died, I was 43. I have never had a boyfriend in my life. I never had a boyfriend. I never went on a date. I never went to official college because I went to MIT. I did a program at MIT, but all this I was married already. I went to college at Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. I did social anthropology there. But I was married. I was a married lady. I never went on a date. I never went dancing. I never kissed another man. And he dies. He dies, I'm 43 years old, after the most horrendous bloody death in the history of the universe. He was dying for 6 months. This gorgeous, handsome, articulate man had a brain tumor and became a vegetable. He left on the 10th of December. we went to, we were in Europe. We were in Europe at a meeting, a medical meeting, and he had a cold or something. He came home and things were weird. He had foot drop and he was getting slower and nobody knew what was wrong with him, and they did CAT scans and this and that, and he was home for 6 months. I took care of him. He and I, in this house, Mark was home. The two was in college. And it was winter because he got sick in October. And earlier. Because sick, yeah. And in November, he left this house on the 10th of December. I never came back, and died on the 10th of May. He had a brain tumor that they didn't find it until until it bled. And I took him to Mass General. He stayed in the Mass General. After the Mass General, they kicked us out because there was nothing to do with him. So I went to another hospital. And after another hospital, I put him in this nursing facility right here up the hill, because it was close, so I could. And I took care of him, and it was a nightmare. So because it was so sad, it was so horrible. So, but I had 6 months to say goodbye. So by the time he died, he was dead. So
then the 5 years. Tell me about the 5 years.
So I was 43. My kids were big. Mark was living at home with me. And eventually I was young. I didn't want to be alone. And I dated. I met some guys. I've got them all written up. My dates. They were a collection. I had so many dates. My mother picked up a guy for me, a physicist, in a plane. I was insane, John. I was insane. My mother came to visit me. She goes back to Brazil. There's a guy sitting next to her. She fancies him. She gets his name and number and everything. He's a physicist, allegedly at IBM in Poughkeepsie. She says to him, "You've got to call my doctor." He's flying to Uruguay. He was in Uruguay, and she's flying to Brazil. She picks him up on the plane, and she says, "I've got a daughter in Boston. When you come back to America, you've got to call my daughter." He calls me, and I go to Poughkeepsie. John. And then he came to my house, and we kind of had a fling for about 3 months. He came here. Barbara met him. My kids met him. He had Thanksgiving with us. It was unbelievable. His name was Nestor. So that's one date. I can't give you detail. That was Nestor.
Okay.
What else did I have? I met Marvin. Rebecca introduced me to Marvin. So I hung around with Marvin. But Marvin was a marvelous relationship. Marvin was a culinary thing. He cooks, we used to look for food. We used to drive all over the place for food, but he was odd. Marvin was very odd. I had high standards, This was all babysitting, just not to be alone. Because I was the only widow. 43 is very rare to be a widow. Everybody's divorced. Being divorced and being a widow is a big difference. Because there was no anger. There was no bitterness. My children didn't have to be pissed at anybody, I was pissed at Dennis eventually, but the man didn't ask to die. I couldn't fight with him about that. So it's a different kind of thing than a divorce. Very important.
All right. So Marvin, Mr. Poughkeepsie.
Mr. Poughkeepsie. Let me tell you, one lawyer that died by now. What? Joe. Very important, because Joe gave me grandchildren. I met Joe because somebody mentioned to Joe and he knew Dennis 100 years ago, because when Dennis used to work, Dennis used to do, for extra money, Dennis used to do physicals on Saturday morning at MIT for the students or the staff and all, he and Herschel Jack. So Dennis knew Joe because Joe was a psychiatrist. And actually Dennis one day came home and said, I met a very nice Englishman and he's a psychiatrist. The next thing I know, the psychiatrist invited us for dinner. So we went to dinner. I met Martha when she was a baby. And then they came once to my house, and then it didn't call it, because Joe's wife was a real pill. And then
Dennis died. Joe calls you up. Hey.
Then somebody mentioned to Joe me, and he knew who I was. He clicked. He was divorced, so I met Joe. And I met Martha. And Joe was never read. We were together, but he was not for me. I mean, we very different, and we became very good friends, very, very good friends. And Alan met Martha. That's how Alan met Martha. And
When you were dating Joe?
when I was dating Joe, he met Martha. Joe was part. They knew absolutely. Martha with Joe. I used to go we used to go to Gurnet. I took the children. The children were invited to Gurnet. Martha had millions of boyfriends, and Alan was absolutely not her boyfriend. Alan had his life. Martha had her life, but they used to meet for Thanksgiving, for a Sunday if they came here, and Joe or the Gurnet, stuff like that. Then Martha had she broke off with a guy.
Yeah, well, why?
I thought that's she broke off with
you know what? Doesn't even matter.
No, she broke off with a guy and Alan moved in. I mean, they took over and that's how they married.
Okay, so then how did you meet Dad?
Dad, I met Andrew because we had friends. What's the name of he's a psychiatrist, friend of the seniors, Blackus. He was a psychiatrist at BU, at New England Medical Center. And they like music and all that, and she knew from Newton. Margie Weiss, your father knew her from Newton.
Wait, who was the person who said you were?
Blacker, Dick Blacker. He was a psychiatrist.
Blacker?
Dick Blacker. He's a psychiatrist, and now he's retired. And they lived in Newton. And his wife, I think, knew your mother and your father. No, they weren't friends, but they knew them. And this Blackers told Dorrit, my best friend, my Dorrit Senior, and they gave him my number. They gave me a number. The craziest thing is that my mother went to a witch a week before your father met your father. My mother went to a witch. She was very superstitious and crazy as a bedbug, and she went to a witch, and my mother called me and said, Anetta, you're going to meet a man. You're going to meet a man. He's going to be divorced. He's going to have 2 children. You're going to meet him on the... No, I never forget this. I've got witnesses to that. That was the 18th of September, John. My mother called me. 18th of September that she went to this witch. And you're not going to marry so soon. It's not going to be. She said, I don't know if you're going to marry him, but you're going to meet him, and this is it. I went to Barbara and I said, Barbara, my mother went to a witch. It was the 18th. Your father called me on the 22nd. We can look it up. He called me up, and I couldn't believe it. He called me up on a Saturday. I was so sick of cooking. I never enjoy cooking for people, as we know. And I said to him, you know what, come on Saturday. He said, when can you come? I said, I'm free. Come. And he said, I'm going out to a concert. He took another lady to a concert, apparently. He said, I'm not, but I can come Saturday. So I said, come after lunch. Wasn't very nice.
To come here for tea or something?
Yeah, I said, come here to after lunch. I swore I never let all the guys that I met, which was many, my place of meeting was the Harvest. That was my meeting place. I never let them in the house.
Where's the Harvest?
Harvest Square, there's a marvelous restaurant, you know, where Crate and Barrel, you go inside that little alley.
Okay.
It's a wonderful bar. And it's
that's where you met for your drinks?
That's where I met, because first of all, I never let them in. I wouldn't, strange people come to my house, so I would meet them there for a drink or a cup of coffee or something, because you can end. And many
Sure.
did. There were two guys. One guy said to me, look, I like you very much, but it's not going to work. So we had a nice cup of tea or a drink. I didn't drink. Goodbye. I met one guy that Dorrit used to work for Dukakis. I met him where the atrium is in the Church Street. And we had a marvelous time, and then we had dinner, and then he looked me in the eye and he said, listen, you're a nice woman. The only reason I'm here is because I live with somebody, and I'm very angry at her. And I went on a date in spite of her, and I wanted to be fair to you. You know? And I know his name and everything, and he worked for Dukakis. And I said, I appreciate that. We had a nice lunch. I never saw him again. So, I mean, there was lots of this kind of a thing.
You're not the only one. Everyone has all of these stories. Believe me.
This is unbelievable. So, you know.
All right, so anyway.
So your father he comes in I look at from the bedroom, I see this guy. He was very nice looking. He was gorgeous, I thought, anyway. And he locked the car.
We're talking about the same person?
This level that I've got.
Okay.
So I see him from the path there. He locks the car, which he still locks the car, and I say, who's going to steal the car from this driveway in Peacock Farm? But never mind. So he locks the car, he comes in, we sit down, I made him tea, That was Saturday or Sunday. Sunday, because Saturday he went on a date with his woman, he told me. So we sat down, we talked, I gave him a cup of tea, then I took him for a walk to the pool. It was a cold day. Then I gave him a drink. I gave him a vodka. Then I cooked him my pasta. He never left. Then he said, he kept calling you guys at the beeper.
Did he stay over that first night?
No, hell no. No, he did not. I wouldn't lie to you. No, but I went with him to Brookline because he had Toby Choi called him on his beeper that had an apartment for him. He had to go and have a look. So I said, I'll go with you after the pasta or before the pasta. I don't know. We went, the two of us, to Brookline to see this apartment. Nothing to do with me. I mean, I just met the guy, and because he was living in Algonquin Road, and he had this Toby Choi. I think she wanted to sell this condo for him. And I looked at that apartment, and I said, Andrew, don't buy this apartment.
Just some.
It was some lame Brookline apartment, you know. I remember it was pokey and dark, and I said, we don't need this apartment. So he brought me back home, and I think maybe then he made the pasta. He never slept yet. Don't be ridiculous, your father. And then that's it. Then he called me, but I called my mother. I called my mother. I said,
"Met a divorcee with 2 children."
The guy arrived.
I told you. What kind of witch was it?
She used to a witch that read hands or read.
Okay, so then how long did you date, and what did?
No, so then we dated. We dated. Then he moved in here, and then we were going to get married, and I got cold feet.
You were going to get married, but then you got cold feet.
Cold feet, and then we waited 6 more months, and then we got married. But we lived together before we got married for 2 years. 1 year he stayed in Algonquin. He wasn't divorced from your mother yet. He couldn't move in here because she could be. We didn't know what, you didn't know what. So your mother could have done bad stuff. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
How can he live with it? He shouldn't. So he stayed in Algonquin. I stayed here until he got divorced, which was a while. I met your father very soon after he separated, and that was very hard for me. Hard for him, because he was a basket case, John.
Did you feel that it was too soon?
Not for me. For me,
First, you were ready.
I'm 5 years living alone. 5 years. I went with Joe to Peru. I went to Portugal. I traveled all over the world. I was alone.
All right. Tell me about how have you enjoyed being married to Dad for the past 20 years?
Well, I enjoyed being married to him. He opened a lot of things. He's a very fun companion to be with, and we traveled a lot together. We have a good time. He was very familiar to me, as I told you. He wasn't an aberration, the Zieka. I mean, he's my mother all over again, I mean, this is what I come, a party at your family is the coffee at the Slone, at the Korsunskis, so it's, Rainey and Henry and the whole schmegegis and, the crazies, and it's like, it's nothing, which I think, it's very familiar.
Okay.
And then... No, and so we live. So 1 year we live apart. 1 year he lived with me. Then we got married.
You and Dad, obviously, there's a lot going on, both maybe good and bad. But I mean, sometimes I hear you guys bickering and arguing, and
we scream and
he's
shout.
a pain in your neck, you're a pain in his neck, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you, or?
Yeah, that I scream. Yeah, I wish I screamed less, but I don't think it's going to happen. No, but
No, I'm saying.
No, we have a very...
So sometimes people communicate by...
Screaming
and yelling and arguing and whatever it is. And then sometimes those things, they don't communicate that way, and the screaming and yelling is a negative sign because it shows that people are arguing and are not happy, which is the case with you.
No, I think that screaming doesn't mean anything. I don't think so. I mean, I think that how can I put it? There are things about him that... how can I put it without this? How can I put this gently? I'm no easy customer, John. I'm difficult because I'm compulsive. living with me is hard because I'm compulsive and I'm clean. I'm very clean, and I'm very clean and I'm very organized and I'm neurotic. Well, so is he. Come on, so isn't he? But we kind of. By the time I was much more neurotic before. This is good already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the final analysis, even though we're not final necessarily, but I mean, you've enjoyed being married for 20 years.
Oh yes, absolutely, because we did a lot of fun stuff. We're very incompatible, but we're very compatible.
Does his interests bother you? The fact that he likes music and art and
no,
trains
no.
and photography.
I think I'll tell you, John. If I even have to say so myself, and my club says this is behind me. I'm a very good kid with these hobbies of his. Just look around what he did with it.
But these trains are beautiful.
Yeah, well, I love
and the music is beautiful.
But
and the art is beautiful.
Well, I like the music very much. I never played an instrument. I do not like chamber music. I like symphonic music. I love opera.
That's fair enough.
And whatever, I wish we could do more of what I like. Now, after 20 years, I said there's no way that I'm going to the Harvard Musical Society and bitch. I'd rather let him go alone. So he can go if he wants to. I don't like for a variety of reasons. That place makes me uncomfortable. Whereas he likes it, I find it. Talk about being alien. John, when I go into that office, that building, there's something about it. It's the fact that they never accepted women. It's the fact that they waspy. It's the fact that it's chamber music. The whole atmosphere.
You know what? I don't care personally about the Harvard Musical Association with respect to what this conversation is about. What I care about is whether or not you enjoy living with.
I enjoy living with your father. Yes.
Even though sometimes he wants to leave and you storm out and
but
you storm back and he storms back.
Yeah, that's not. No. I enjoy living with him.
That's all okay with
I
you.
enjoy living with him. I think we travel very well together. When we companions, we are good companions. There are aspects of him that now it's better. John, when I got married to him, when I met him, he was divorced. Not divorced yet. It was very hard for him. He was very frightened that he was going to lose you guys. It was very difficult for me, his involvement with you guys. It's hard, and one day you might understand, or you already might understand already. My children, I could say go play in traffic, which I did, and you remember when I said go play in traffic, you know what, it's
not really, but it's okay.
No, go, they knew that I had a life. I was very easy with them. I could say go and don't come back, or he's going to sleep over, don't, I was easy with my children because I didn't have any baggage, and I didn't understand and that he had so much baggage. And that baggage, many times, sometimes I felt then that if I hadn't loved him or I hadn't liked him, or if I did, I would have said, the baggage is too much, and I maybe bit more than I could chew. But it works out. It works out. He's difficult sometimes. He's doing well at work now, but Julie always is behind me. She knows, the business with the lab, and he's going to lose his grant and his money, and this is stressful. And he wakes up in the middle of the night and wakes up in the morning and fetches about the lab and the this and the that.
Right.
John, it's tiresome.
Oh, I understand.
And and this is you, and so we all talk the same language, because from the day I met him, I remember when I met him, the minute I met him, there was some paper, the milk paper, and he had to write a grant, and the money in the grant, there was always something, and I was used to it because Dennis always lived with grants too. It's a pain in the neck.
Right.
But it was hard.
How do you think, this is pure speculation obviously, but how do you think your life would have been different if Dennis hadn't died and had been living through today healthfully?
If he hadn't died, we would have not gotten divorced, as far as I can tell. But there was one thing that by Dennis dying, he never let me, because he married me when I was a child, and he took care of me. He was older than me 10 years.
He always did everything for you.
Everything. He took care of me. He infantilized me. but I liked it. See, there was never any. I don't know how it would have been.
Do you have any regrets in your
Did I
life?
marry him?
No. In general, in life, and
No.
you don't have to share anything you don't.
No,
want.
I don't have. I don't regret marrying. See, by marrying Dennis, even though my life could have been at 13 if I had married him and and was unhappy, my life would have been a disaster. But what happened was that by marrying him, I traveled. I went to Africa, opened my horizons.
Oh yeah, sure.
It opened my life. I ended up in Boston. If I hadn't married him, by marrying your father, I met many people. You know, despite what you might think, I like the family. I like the Plauts.
Who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't? You see, I like the Plauts. I find that I like Rainey, I like Henry, I like Martin. Go figure. There are certain people that I don't love, but I can't say on print. But or not on I can't. But I really like Martin. As crazy as he is, I get along with him. I like Rainey, I like Henry, I like the whole Klein siblings. I enjoy them. I went to France with I met what's my phone? Oh my God. Oh, Susan. I met Susan in Paris. We had a wonderful time. I liked it. I like the family. I have no family. I have nobody. I have no blood relative except for one cousin in Brazil. She's my second cousin, Sonia, which I called 2 days ago, and we keep in touch. She's the only one that shares my DNA. I have no one except for my children, this generation. I have nobody from the past. So for me, family is very important. So I like the Plauts, and I understand them, and it's something to you understand.
Anything else that you would like to share about any aspect of anything?
There are things that I can share. That some things that get on my nerves and stuff like that. And I don't think it'd be productive to say no, because then it becomes argumentative, and it becomes what's the point?
Do you mind if I share this video with your children and Mariah?
Absolutely. There's nothing secret here. It's.
I think it's good stuff.
You think I've got stuff that is very good that is written down. I've got a tape. What happened was that I used to talk on a tape because I was lonely. When Dennis died, I spoke on a tape. I talked about dates. I spoke how I met your father. I even talked the whole story about the Harvard Musical Society. That was the bane of my existence until I grew up and said, I'm not going there anymore. I deserved not to go. So there was something about that place that got to me, John. There's something about that place that really gets to me. And then to assume that I don't like music, that's not right. I just don't like that place. And I think I had a good life. I was lucky. I was lucky that I didn't die in the Holocaust. I was lucky that I was born in Brazil. I was lucky that I had the parents that I did. I was lucky I met Dennis. I was lucky that I came to America. I've got nice children. I'm lucky I met Andrew. From all the lemons I met, he's the best.
The best of the lemons?
The best
the
of the
ripest and
the
most
ripest
bitter?
No, he was never bitter. He was good. I like you guys. I like Julie and you. You were unbearable when you were 16.
Why?
You were too much. Too much. You were difficult. But you grew up marvelous.
You like that?
You had
huh?
a earring. You had a earring.
Yeah.
You had a earring.
Can't argue with the results now.
No, I like you. I trust you, and I like you, and you're very nice to me. You are. You always were nice to me. You're nicer to me than my own children. I tell them so too.
Well about that.
But we're different. We're all different.
Right.
We come from different backgrounds, but not really.
Right.
You see. And what else? And that's it. But I spoke more than I wanted to.
Well, if you ever want to say anything else, you know where to find me.
What do you think? You think it was okay? This?
I think it's fantastic. I think this is an instant heirloom.
Yeah, it's good for them to have, because do they see my face too or no?
Instant heirloom.
Oh God, that I don't want to see.
Are you kidding?
What do you mean?
Here, I'll show you.
Oh, I'm going to be old and I hate it.
No.
Oh, I hate it. I hate being old. You want something negative? I hate it. I'm not gracious about it. I hate it. What's this?